Hello everyone, welcome to this month's Substance Education webinar. And so we'll get started here in just a moment. Just going to see if a few more people join in. Just let me know real quick in the comments if you can hear me okay. All right, perfect, everyone. Let's get moving then. So this month, or in this webinar, what we were going to do is, just take a look at Substance Painter this time. And we wanted to see, or at least discuss, some of the kind of caveats and workflows to, creating models, and getting them into Painter. So a lot of questions that we get, especially when visiting studios or, asking questions from students, is that they're like, well, okay, I have my mesh, what's a texture set? How do I assign a material? What's the best way to work with my UVs and so on? So we're just going to go through the process of demonstrating just a couple techniques on the best ways to get your content here inside of Painter. So we're just going to get started actually with talking about mirror UVs because that's a question a lot of people have. So let's start off just by creating, I'm just going to have just something really basic here. So let's just have like a cube and let me just scale it up. And I'll just do a quick duplicate on it. Just making a really simple shape that we can bring in and we're going to bake our normal map from. So here, let's select these two guys here, and I'll just do like a quick little boolean here. All right, so I've got like this shape, and now I need to make my UVs for this. So let me just open up my UV editor, and let me bring that here into the window view so it's on my other monitor. There we go. All right, window's like crazy big, so let's just scale this guy up here. All right, so we need to make our UVs. So let's take a look at this here. All right, so in this particular case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make my UVs just based on my my hard edges here. So nothing too crazy with that. So I'll just do just to get some type of UVs going here. Select my object. I've got a little script here that's going to let me select my hard edges. So I'm just going to run this guy. Let's see here. Over in this area. There we go. So we select the hard edges, and then I'm just going to cut these guys. So we'll just come over here and cut. Let me come over here to my UVs now. UVs. And Maya's giving me a fit here. It's not letting me select anything. Just a moment. I had this problem earlier as well. What is going on here? All right, here we go. All right, so I just did a quick unfold, and now I'm just going to lay these guys out. So let me go into my layout here and my layout options. And so for my layout options, what I'm doing here is I'm just using the layout UVs. Let's see. Let me double check. All right, sorry about that. It looks like there was a problem with the screen. It was set on the other, shoot, it was recording on the other screen. All right, can everybody see my screen okay? I'll just wait to get confirmation on that, and then we'll keep moving forward. All right, there we go. Sorry, everybody. It looks like I just had the I had OBS set to the wrong screen there. So okay, well we didn't miss anything. I'm just setting up some quick UVs so that we can just get this process. So one of the things that I like to do for the UVs is, I just lay them out. In my particular case, just laying them out based on hard edges, and I want to make sure that I have like a specific amount of padding here. So let's see, I got everybody set up. I'll just click apply, and now I've got my UVs just laid out for me here. So in this case, you can see that each one of these shells has a little bit of padding in here, and that's going to help because of the dilation setting that I have inside of inside of Painter as well. So I don't want to have my UVs just hitting right on top of each other, just like right next to each other. And then also sometimes here I can run into a little bit of an issue. So what I like to do is I'm just going to have my UV selected here. I'm just going to scale them down just a little bit. Again, just to give myself a little bit of padding in here like this. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do for this guy, let's take this object here and just move it off to the side. Now let's say that we had this object and we wanted to mirror a piece of this here. So I'm going to come over here to my mirror, and we'll set this here on the X. Based on my world. Okay, so now we've got this object, and we've got we did one set of UVs, and then we just duplicated and mirrored it. That means that all of our UVs are now going to just be overlapping here. So we're going to have our overlapping UVs, as you can see here. So this is okay to do inside of Painter. What we're going to, if we start to paint, it's just going to actually completely mirror the strokes and everything, again, naturally, because our UVs are overlapping. However, when we have a setup like this, this can cause some artifacting when we're actually baking. So what we want to do is just kind of be aware of that. Now, if we have our shells stacked absolutely perfectly like we've done here, we're not going to get any problems. But if we have just any little bit of a discrepancy between the space of the UVs and how they're overlapping, it's going to cause some artifacts in our bake. So one of the things that we could do is just offset our UVs for the bake just to be sure we're not going to have any problems with that. So just to show you that, I'm going to come over to this second object and select the UVs. And then here in the Maya UV editor, we'll go to transform. And I have the move set to 1. So what it's going to do is just move these UVs into the next UV tile. So I'll just click the button to do that. So now I've just offset the UVs. Now, when you have UV set up like this in Painter, and I'll demonstrate this, you'll be able to paint here, but Painter, you can't paint outside of the 0 to 1 space. So you'll have to be aware of that. But in this case, we're just using it to make sure that we get a super clean bake without any artifacts. So now that we have this guy, we'll select it, and then I'm just going to export this selection here. And here on my desktop, let's see, we'll just call this box slow, just so we have something here. I'm going to place it on my desktop. Now, let me talk a little bit about the export settings that I use for FBX, for the FBX output. That's what I'm using. So here in the geometry, we have smoothing groups enabled. So I'm going to want that because I actually have these hard edges and things like that set up already on my mesh. So I want to make sure that I export my smoothing groups. Then we have our tangents and binormal setting here, and we've kind of discussed this before, but it's important to really understand how Painter's working in this regard. So Painter is actually going to use the MIC-T tangent basis when it's baking the normal map. That's how it's going to use to compute the normal for the normal. So that's really good. That's a great tangent basis to use, and it's actually the tangent basis that's used inside of Unreal Engine, and it's also the same one that's used inside of Unity by default. That wasn't always the case, but I think since several versions ago, Unity's adopted MIC-T space. So you get this synced workflow between all of the applications, which is exactly what you want to do. Whenever you bake a normal map with one tangent basis and you try to render it in a viewport or a render that uses a different one, you're going to get some issues, and you'll see shading artifacts and things like that. So a way around that is you'll notice that people were always adding support loops and all this kind of stuff to really control the shading of the normal map. But once you have a synced workflow, you don't have to worry about that so much. So in this case, I'm going to leave the tangents and binormals off because what I want to do is when I import this FBX, I want to make sure that Painter will use MIKT to compute this normal for me. So I want to keep this turned off. Now, if this was enabled, when you import the FBX, Painter will see this, will see the tangents and binormals, and it will use those to compute the normal. So you just want to make sure when you go into, say, Unity or UE4, you'd have to do the same thing. You'd have to force Unity or UE4. I know you can do that in UE4. I'm not sure about Unity, but you can have UE4 use the tangents and binormals from the mesh as well. So it just depends on how you're working, but I like to just keep everything off because I know I'm going into Painter. I'm usually using Designer as well, so it's all synced. My next thing, I'm going to go into UE4 Unity, so everything is good. Let's see. So the other option here is triangulate. And you always want to triangulate your mesh before you bake the normal because you want to use the same triangulated mesh to bake the normal map as you want to use like in your render. Like say we're going to take this to UE4, we want to make sure that this mesh is triangulated, we bake the normal, and then that same triangulated mesh is what's used inside of UE4 because different programs triangulate in different ways, so you can get a discrepancy there as well. So, usually I'll leave triangulate on here, or I'll just manually triangulate it here in the viewport, one of the two. What I've been doing lately, I just leave this off and I just manually do it here in the file. I have like a triangulated version I export just because I like to have like control over, every single aspect that I'm doing. So in this particular case, I'm just leaving it off because we're just going to be in Painter for this, so it doesn't matter. Okay, so that's typically the main settings I'll use, and then we'll just export this guy. All right, so the next thing is I need a little high-res mesh, and so I can make it really quick here by using this other little plugin that I absolutely love to use. That's this shapeshifter. So I'm just going to run this guy, and it's just going to bevel my hard edges for me. So I'll just come in and just create a little support loop here, and my bevel offset, and then a few divisions. And just kind of rounds my model up like this. All right, so now that I have that, we'll then export this guy as well. So export selection, and this is going to be my high-res mesh. So just change that to underscore high. All right, so now we're good, and we'll export this guy. Okay, so now we have our meshes. Let's jump over to Painter. So we'll come in here to Painter. And now I'm going to just import this guy in, and here's our no mesh selected, so we need to add a mesh, and we'll use box low. We're not using any UDIM tiles, so we're going to leave it like this, and that's important too in this particular case because we actually do have a UDIM tile because we've offset our UVs, and we don't want that we don't want the UVs that are in that second tile to become a texture set, so we want to make sure that we leave that off. And then this other setting here, this compute tangent space per fragment, is specific to UE4. So again, if you're baking your normal in this whole project, the whole, the end goal here is to take this into UE4, you'd want to make sure that you have this checked. So we'll just go ahead and load this guy up. All right, so here's our mesh. Ah, shoot, I left that other box piece in there. Sorry about that. I meant to delete that guy out of there. Whoops. That is going to cause a problem for me. All right, here, let me just delete history on this guy, and we'll delete this. Let me just re-export this guy real quick. So box high. All right, and then we'll do the same thing. Let me just undo what I have here. There we go. I left my Boolean cutter piece in there. Sorry about that. All right, so export selection. And this window just keeps moving everywhere. So let's do this guy as low. All right. Now we're good. Back to Painter. So here in this case, I'm just going to change my mesh. So I just went to my project configuration. All right, now we're back. Okay, so like I said, now we want to actually go into the process of baking our map here. So let's just, we have a single texture set. Let's go over here to our texture set settings, and we're just going to bake our normal. I'm going to keep this at a 2K resolution, And I'll grab my high res, and these settings are going to work for me for now. So we'll just bake this. All right, so now I get a really clean bake here with that normal map that I created. No artifacts to worry about, but as I was saying earlier, so I can paint on this guy, but this guy here I can't paint on because the UV set is showing up outside that 0 to 1 space. So if I take a look at my UVs, here you can see what I'm getting here. All right, so let's say that we do our bake now, and we know this is like very clean. So one question that just came in here: are creased edges recognized in Painter as they are with ZBrush? I honestly, I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think so. I don't want to say 100% no, but I do not think that they are supported like they are in ZBrush. Because we're not actually subdividing anything. But I need to, I don't know, I'll need to test that out or check with the developers. But I do not think that the crease weighting is supported. Okay, so now I'm going to go back here to my project configuration. Oh, here, let's do this. Let's jump back over to Maya for a second. So this was our low-res mesh. So we'll go back here into, let's see, where's my UV editors? Just right here. All right, let me just grab these faces here, and then I'm just going to move them back. So now I've just have them overlapped again. And I'll just call this overlap low, just so it's different. Okay, so let me go back to Painter. Now let me try to just change this configuration. So we're going to go to Edit, Project Configuration, and this is where I can bring in like a new mesh. So I'm going to select the overlap UVs. And here I should be able to preserve stroke positions on mesh. Let's see if it works for me in this case. Okay, so you can see that it sort of works, but this is, you can see now that my stroke is actually mirrored for me. So I had painted on that before, and so now it worked. Let me turn off that stroke, because here, the other thing that I'm really curious about is my normal map, and now that's working fine as well. So everything worked as expected. So I was able to, bake, not having to worry about my overlap causing any type of artifacting in my bake maps. And then here I'm able to paint with my stroke, and you can see that it's perfectly mirrored here. So that can be just a technique. Now, if you have a setup like I do here in this particular case, I was also testing this with just baking with the UVs mirrored like this, and I was actually getting a pretty decent result that way too. So I didn't have to worry about it so much. But again, if we look, I mean, my UVs are perfectly matched. So, in this case, it wasn't a problem. But, if you have a really, and it's a super basic shape as well. So if you have a complex shape or something else, just know that if you need to offset your UVs, you can do that and then bake and then bring them back and then paint mirrored like that as well. All right, so that's one particular way that we could work inside of Painter with mirrored UVs. And like I said, that question comes up quite a lot, and I would assume that probably your students are going to ask that question as well. So yes, we can work with the mirrored UVs. Right, so the next thing I was going to show was another workflow that we show when we go into Studios, and that's working with ZBrush. So let me just open ZBrush. And it'll take just a moment here. ZBrush usually takes a while. But the other part that I did want to just kind of stress again with this is that here when I do my UVs, I always try to work with some padding between my UVs. So here I'm getting a really clean normal map, really because of the way that I have a smoothing split here on these UVs. So I got a UV split right where the smoothing split is, meaning that's where the hard edge is. So there's a UV shell for every hard edge, and then I put the padding here. And that is going to help me for when I have my normal map, and the normal map has some padding like this. I'm not going to get any type of artifacting due to the texture interpolation being lower than the kind of more of the infinite resolution of what the monitor, the mesh is. So I don't have to, that's going to be a kind of a workaround or a workflow, I will say, to create, also kind of artifact-free normal map bakes as well. And it's a good rule of thumb anyways, just to kind of have a padding between your UVs when you work. Okay, so like I said, I've got ZBrush up finally over here. Let me see if I can't get this guy on the correct monitor though. Okay, here we go. All right, so let's see. I just want to try, there's actually a model that I've been working on here. And so I'll just use that for this example. So let me just open this gap. I have a little Z tool that I just saved out. Let's see. All right. And this was kind of like the early stages of this guy. Whoops. All right, here we go. Okay, so let me come over here to my geometry, and I'm just going to lower the resolution on this guy quite a bit. All right, so let's say we had something like this, and I'm just going to delete my higher and my lower. All right, so let's just say this is what I'm going to end up taking over into Painter. And so what I do with ZBrush is I try to always work with FBX. So if I want to work, exact with ZBrush. So say I want to, I'm working on a concept piece in ZBrush, and then I want to be able to take that right into Painter and work with it. So you can actually set up, your materials here in ZBrush as well. Now in this case, I deleted the low and high because when I export this, I just wanted it to go a little faster on the export out of ZBrush. But let's say that, let's see, I'm going to come into here and let me put this on lasso select, and actually mirroring on. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just divide this guy up. Oh, thanks very much. Yeah, this model, it's a character I made. His name's Tater. He's kind of a big, kind of Kentucky redneck guy because I'm from Kentucky. That's where I am. So I don't know, just kind of something I've been working on for a while. And actually, this guy is going to be used in a new Substance Painter course, so an introduction to Painter. So I'm going to use a character. He's going to have some kind of like football shoulder pads and some different things like that he has. So yeah, it'll end up being the focus of that. But thank you very much. Okay, so now I've got this guy. Let me just turn these off. All right, so what I'm going to do here is just do like my group visible. And then here, let me break off my head. Whoops. Sorry, I'm trying to use this with a mouse. All right, so we'll come into here and just group visible, and then this will be like the midsection here. So we'll just do something like this, and let's see, group visible. All right, so basically I just made a couple polygroups for this guy. And so say that, like I said, now I want to get this over to Substance Painter. So one of the things that, one of the things that you can do right off the bat, this guy actually already has UVs, I think, but let me check. So you would want to do your UVs as well. And yep, so I've already got some UVs for this guy. So no problem, but you could easily do those here in ZBrush just using UV Master. It's an amazing tool to do that with. So, once I do that, I kind of break things up into these groups, and here under my subtool, I just have this layer selected here, and I made these polygroups. So then I come over here to my Z plugin, and underneath my FBX export options, under options, I make sure that my export polygroups as materials is enabled. So this is, again, going to take my polygroups and just export them as materials, which Painter is going to see as texture set. So I just make sure I do that. Also, I have smooth normals on, and I leave the orientation as Maya Y up. And in this case, do I want to, I'm going to do selected. So what this is going to do is export all of the subtools that are selected. Okay, so now that I have that set up, I'll just come over and just export. Whoops. There it is. And let's just place it here on the desktop so I can get to it real quick. All right, so now we'll jump back over here to Painter and create a new project. All right, so now my mesh is here, and you'll see that I now have my material groups. So there was my arms, there's the body piece, the legs, and the head. Now, the problem with this technique, though, is that it's just the way that the ZBrush plugin works out of, exporting the polygroups. I mean, it just gives you these terrible names. Like you have to go and rename this. Usually if it's something very vital, I'll take it into, say, Maya or whatever, and just rename the materials. So there is that extra step with that. I wish there was a way that they would just use, you could set up some type of naming convention, but there really isn't a way for that right now in their UI for this. So you get kind of stuck like that. But, if you're just going back and forth between ZBrush and Painter, just to, do some concept work, this is a really fast way, because you can work this way and never have to open up like another 3D program. You can set up your materials or your texture sets right there from ZBrush. Another thing that I'll do out of ZBrush as well is the way I kind of group this. So one of the things that I might do in this case is have my model here, and then go ahead and duplicate this guy. So on this second version here, this is when I might come over here to my geometry tab and let's see. Well, I deleted the high and low, but let's just say this was my high res version of that. So then I'll just name this guy. So on my subtool, what I would do here for the rename of this guy. So where is that here? Underneath rename. So maybe this would be tater body, and then I use the underscore. There is a way to do the underscore, and I forgot how that works. I can't quite remember what it is, but there is a shortcut way of doing this, and I forgot what it is. But you can do the underscore. But basically, what I'm going to do here in this case, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to I'll just keep it like this for now. So anyways, this is kind of another good way to, it's going to segue into another setting. So let's say that I have it like this, and then this guy here, whoops, well, that'd be my low. Let's just pretend this one's the high. So we'll come into this guy here, and we'll do high. So now I have my low and the high. And then when I go to export here out of my Z plugin, I can also, choose to export selected, visible, or all. So it depends on what groups I have set up. So here I might select both of these two as visible and just export them. But this is going to give me my low and my high. So if I go back to Painter and I'm looking at my bake settings here, and let's say that I'm baking my normal for different subtools, that's when I can come into my high poly mesh suffix and use the underscore low and high. So that's how I'm getting those two pieces to break off. And of course, if we wanted to, I could just use the convention like this out of ZBrush. But like I said, there is a way to make that do an underscore. Someone showed me that, and I completely forgot how it works, but it is possible. But if not, say none of us could remember, you can just set it up like this. And so that allow us to use the match by mesh name option. So that allows us to basically, when the normals are getting baked, the raycast will be isolated or masked, I'll say, to whatever of those subtool parts are matching. So it would bake, if we go back into ZBrush, it would look at the high poly. So in this case, let's say I had like the shirt and all the clothes together with him and his hat and everything. In that particular case, it's only going to bake this mesh and this mesh, almost like those other subtool parts don't exist. So that gives you a really clean bake as well. So like say he's got like this shoulder pad piece, that ray intersection would actually project down onto the body part of the normal, and so you can stop that from happening by use match by mesh name. Okay, so that's kind of the workflow that I really use a lot for ZBrush. The only problem with it is like I said, those material IDs come in with that odd naming, which kind of stinks. So the next thing that I wanted to take a look at here was another kind of prep scene. So let me just bring this guy up. So let's see, I have this in my demo assets. let me look at it this way. Let me just try the actual FBX. All right, so I'm just bringing the attribute editor over here. All right, there we go. So this here is like the low resolution part of this weapon here. And so you can see it's made up of a bunch of different mesh parts. And so here's all the mesh parts. So it's one model. I just kind of group it underneath, I just make a group of it here. And then you have all these parts here. And these parts are going to have, different materials associated with them. So you can see we have grip barrel. And there's another one in here. Here, this piece right here is part of grip barrel and so on. If we look at the UVs with this, and let me just turn off this image here. It's kind of hard to see. Still trying to get used to this new UV editor here. And inside of Maya, this update 3. Where is that? There it is. Nope. All right, there is a way to toggle that off. Which one is it? Okay, we won't worry about it. All right, I'll just dim it here. All right, so this is, you can see my UVs here for each of these parts. And so if I look at all the ones that are associated, and the way I kind of do it here inside of Maya is I just use here my layer editor. So let's say that I want to look at everything that's associated with the base. So here I'll just select all objects, and so you can see that all of these like sub objects here that make up. Oh, thank you very much. Someone just posted in here the shortcut. Yeah, I knew there was a shortcut to do it. Thank you very, very much. So here you'll see that we have the UVs for all of this material, and so once they're all packed together, you can see they fit perfectly in that 0 to 1 space. And so you can see that the way I have it, I'm not doing any overlapping UVs. Here's another one here for my grip barrel. So here we'll select these guys. And again, everybody that's selected here in the viewport, this is how they're laid out here in the UVs. Now, in this case, though, for this asset, I end up with only these 4 materials here. So each one of these guys is going to end up just being a material set here. So that's what they are. And so 4 materials. And then I export it this way. So the next step of this, though, is then I'll use the high resolution to set multiple materials. So let's go into the high res. And hopefully this guy's set up correctly. So this becomes the high res mesh, and he has got tons of materials. So once this is set up, what I'll do is I'll just make a bunch of Lambert materials, and then I'll just kind of drag and drop them onto either a face selection, or it'll be like a whole polygon part like this. And so this becomes my ID map. So I want to use the high res mesh as not only the mesh for all the high res details, so I can bake my normal and everything, but I also want to use it for my IDs. And so I'll place all this in the high res mesh. Now, once we get back to Substance Painter, so let's come into a new document here. And let's just browse for this guy real quick. Let's see, it's in demo assets. Whoops. Up one more. Here we go. Okay, so now what I'll do is see I've got my separate texture sets here. Now I want to go and just bake this for my ID map, basically. So if I come in and I got my baked textures, and we'll just turn everybody off, and for my ID, so it's going to pull this ID here from whatever mesh I have in my whatever mesh I have set for my high res. Now in my case, I use the high res to apply the materials, but you don't have to do that. You could use just a copy of the low res, because a lot of times I'll find that it's easier to select faces in the low res than really. I'm just imagining this model. It was basically the same, but like maybe something that, again, you pulled out of ZBrush or something, it would be like really hard to bring that into Maya and try to, you know, go through and select all these faces and everything. So you may not want to use that. So what I'll do is I'll bake all my maps in those cases. So say everything here is baked. I'll turn off my ID. So I'll bake everything. Then I'll set this to off, and then I'll add another mesh into here. So this guy would just remove and then add the mesh that I'm using specifically for the ID bake. So we'll use this guy here, and then you can choose your source here. So in the color source, we've got vertex color or material color. So I would want to use material color since I set that up. But let's say maybe, again, if you're coming from ZBrush, you use Polypaint to quickly create your materials. Maybe you didn't want to export FBX and use the polygroups or however you created that to create the texture sets. You could just use Polypaint and then just bake it straight here using vertex color. So in that case, in our case here, we're just going to use material color. And so I could set that to material color. And here for the texture set, we're looking at this base texture set. But we have 4 here. So what I'd like to do is apply this setting I have to everyone. So I'll hit apply all. And now you'll notice that if I come down to, let's say, handle, it's also set to material color for me. So you can set these individually to have different settings, or you could just, set one and then apply that to every texture set in your scene. So now I can do just my bake all texture sets, and this is just going to bake that ID from that mesh. So one of the questions that we get a lot with this, so here you can see I've got my ID map now, and if I come over here to my viewer settings, additional maps, ID, here's my ID map. And I can use this to quickly do any type of selections. So one of the things that people ask a lot about is, okay, I want to be able to merge these texture sets here. And so we don't really support the merging of texture sets. So what you need to do is make sure that you structure your mesh correctly so that it will work for that. So you can merge that. And so what I'll tell people to do is, go and just set a single, if you want just a single set of textures, then it's best just to use a single material to do that. And then you'll use your ID to help you create your masking for you. So in the case of going back to Maya, and let's say here, let me just open that low res version. So here, let me just take these 2 pieces here, and let's just say that we had this, these 2 pieces, and we'll open up the UV editor here. What you need to do is just make sure that these pieces are not overlapping like this. So here in this case, let's see if I can just do it really quickly. There we go. So I just laid out everything. And so you can see that this piece has, these guys missing, and this piece has these guys missing. And then what I would do is just assign this here as a single material. So here I'll just assign, let's just say, a blend to this. So this guy has 1 material with all the UVs overlapping. Then I might take a new mesh, or the high-res version of that, and then a high-res version, of course, would be like what we just showed, where it would have all these multiple materials assigned so you get all the IDs. So the idea is that, once you get back here into Painter, you're going to have one single texture set. So it's just going to be the one texture set. And then what I do is I say we should break up the materials as groups here in the layer stack. So in that case, what I would do is say, all right, here, I create a layer folder, and then I might call this handle. And then I'd create another one here and call this let's see, base. So this is the base. And then all the layers that make up the base are going to go inside the base group. And then I think of this layer group as the full material. Same thing with the handle. All of the layers that make up the materials, and there could be multiple materials within that layer. It doesn't within that layer group. It doesn't matter. It's just I'm thinking of this layer group the same as if I were to just assign that material inside of Maya itself. And then say I want to mask for the base. That's when I come in and I'll just add a mask with color selection here, and then I will pick with my ID like this. And so now if I take a look at the mask, and I can Alt left click right on that mask to view it really quickly, this is the ID mask that I have now. So that represents the material. And then I do the same thing here for the handle. So here we could just add a mask with color selection, and let's see if there's a, let's say it was that there. So that represents, that white area represents one material, and then this one here represents another area of the material here. And all of that is created here within a single layer stack underneath one texture set. So then when I export, I'm going to get one set of textures, but all my UVs are going to be laid out this way. And so that's the way that we recommend that people work with their models. There isn't a way to like have like all these multiple texture sets and then easily, you know, merge them all down. You'd have to manually do that. So one of the reasons that people would want to use these multiple IDs like this is because for the exact reason that I'm doing here, I'm able to solo based on, you know, the material ID. And so a lot of times when you're painting like this, you want to be able to isolate mesh parts like this. And so that is where this single material texture set and then, you know, masking everything based here in the layer stack kind of breaks down, because, you know, then you don't have a way to hide your meshes. So that kind of stinks in that regard. So one of the things that we are working on and that we will introduce to Painter is the ability to hide not just you know, a mesh based on its material, but based on mesh parts as well. So that'll be a really nice feature to have inside Substance Painter, and I think is probably the core reason why a lot of people are wanting to use this single texture set. But it becomes an issue because we see a lot of questions come in like that, where somebody will create a bunch of layers just so they can hide stuff on and off, but then they're like, hey, I need to merge everything together, and then it becomes this huge manual process. So like when you're actually teaching this, I always recommend just using the single texture set and then doing your masking this way here. This is also a good way because once you set up things, like say you create you know, a bunch of base materials that are inside this group, what you can then do is you know, just clear out this mask or just remove it and then save this here as a smart material. That means that you have this really nice reusable material for handles, and you may use that on all kinds of different weapon assets, or you know, I don't know, any other kind of tool that has a handle. Maybe it's something you want to be able to reuse. So this method also gives you, you know, the reusability of what you're doing here in your layer stack. So that's going to come to the end of what we want to show here for this particular webinar this month. So what I'd like to do is, anybody has any questions, you know, please just let me know. You can always email me directly. In case you don't have it, I'm going to add my email address right here into the chat window. And yes, of course, you know, please, like I said, always hit me up. I'm always open to answer any questions or help in any way that I can. So also another thing, if you have an idea over something you'd like to see covered specifically in these education webinars, I would also love to get an email. Charles and I both would love to get that email from you guys so that we could get some feedback on what it is you guys want to see for the lessons. So yeah, we just try to, you know, focus them on, you know, a lot of the questions that are being asked in our forums and things like that. So, and also trying to have the mindset of maybe what a student is doing. So, like I said, if you have any suggestions, please just email us directly and let us know, and we'd be happy to, you know, tailor the courses specifically to some of the questions or different workflows that you guys want to see. So again, thanks everybody for joining us, and look forward to our next webinar. Everybody take care.